Summary. On March 2, 1978, at 7:13 hours, a municipal sanitation worker assigned to early morning route inspections contacted Franklin County Dispatch to report what appeared to be a human body in a drainage culvert alongside Interstate 270, approximately 2 miles south of the East Main Street exit. Deputy Thomas R. Leland arrived on scene at 7:26 hours and located a deceased female submerged to the sternum in runoff water. Initial observations confirmed the body was missing all 4 limbs, both arms severed above the elbow, both legs severed at mid-thigh. The cuts appeared clean, consistent with the use of a serrated or powered cutting tool. Scene conditions. The weather was overcast and damp, following a night of heavy rainfall. Water levels in the culvert were elevated, causing minor flooding of the area. The body had become partially lodged against a concrete drainage barrier, with residual foliage and garbage partially obscuring it from view. The victim was clothed, denim jacket, green knit sweater, tan corduroy trousers, all garments waterlogged but undamaged. Blood saturation was minimal at the scene, suggesting post-mortem relocation. No limbs were recovered in the immediate vicinity. Ligature marks were visible around the neck, wrists, and ankles. The stumps of the severed limbs showed no hemorrhaging, supporting forensic opinion that the amputations occurred post-mortem. Under the left index fingernail, investigators retrieved a beige synthetic fiber. Subsequent laboratory testing identified the fiber as consistent with automotive upholstery used in 1970 to 1977 General Motors vehicles. Victim identification and autopsy. The body was later identified via dental records as Denise Marie Harrow, age 18, an undergraduate student at Ohio State University. She had last been seen on February 27, 1978, leaving a study session at Thompson Library around 2100 hours. Her roommate, Lisa Callahan, reported her missing the following afternoon. Autopsy was conducted on March 3, 1978, by Dr. Evelyn Marks at the Franklin County Coroner's Office. Cause of death was determined as asphyxiation due to manual strangulation, with ligature compression as a contributing factor. Time of death was estimated at 48 to 72 hours prior to discovery. No evidence of sexual assault was found. Toxicology was negative for drugs or alcohol. The amputations were confirmed to be post-mortem, likely conducted with a mechanical saw or reciprocating blade. Additional injuries included 3 fractured ribs and extensive bruising to the upper torso. Investigative observations. There were no signs of robbery. Denise's wallet was found 3 blocks from campus. It contained her student ID and credit cards, with only the cash removed. There was no sign of a struggle at the disposal site, confirming the victim was likely killed and dismembered elsewhere before being transported. The presence of vehicle upholstery fibers under the fingernail suggests close physical contact, most likely within an enclosed space such as a car interior. Denise was known for her cautious behavior and aversion to traveling alone at night. Investigators theorized that the offender employed deception, possibly impersonating a figure of authority, to gain compliance. Case status. At the time, no additional victims had been linked to the case. The mutilation of the body, particularly the removal of limbs, was considered a potential signature, indicating either ritualistic behavior or forensic countermeasure. The case remained unsolved and under active investigation, though media coverage quickly diminished due to a lack of leads. On May 17, 1978, at approximately 5:46 hours, a jogger discovered human remains on a disused access road behind Alum Creek Park, approximately 12 miles northeast of central Columbus. The location was wooded, rarely trafficked, and bordered by tall brush and tree cover. Patrol officers from the Columbus Police Department were first on scene. The body was found positioned face down beneath a scattering of broken branches and a thin layer of leaves, clearly arranged to obscure visibility from the road. Upon examination, it became immediately evident that the body was missing all 4 limbs. Scene conditions and recovery. The weather was clear, with ambient morning temperatures at 57 degrees Fahrenheit. Decomposition was consistent with an estimated post-mortem interval of 36 to 48 hours. The victim, a young female, was clothed in a white peasant-style blouse and torn blue jeans. Garments were partially removed but not intentionally destroyed. There were no defensive tears, punctures, or indications of a blade used on the clothing. The severed limb sites, both arms and both legs, showed clean post-mortem amputation. Like the first victim, hemorrhaging was absent at the cut surfaces, suggesting the dismemberment occurred after death. Ligature marks were visible on the neck, wrists, and ankles. Deep, symmetrical neck contusions indicated use of a thin cord or wire, consistent with ligature strangulation. The body showed minor abrasions and bruising on the back, but no evidence of sexual assault was observed. A detailed combing of the hair and clothing produced several beige synthetic fibers identical in composition to those recovered from the first victim. Victim identification and autopsy. Using fingerprints and dental records, the body was identified as Martha Lynn Coleman, age 19, reported missing on May 14, 1978. She was last seen leaving her evening shift at Norman's Diner, located on High Street near the University District, at approximately 2200 hours. Her vehicle, a 1973 Plymouth Duster, was found the next morning parked 2 blocks from the diner, driver's door ajar and keys in the ignition. Her purse and personal belongings were inside, undisturbed. Autopsy performed by Dr. Evelyn Marks on May 18, 1978, confirmed death by ligature strangulation. Time of death was estimated between midnight and 2 o'clock hours on May 15. Post-mortem dismemberment was performed with a fine-toothed, high-powered saw, likely mechanical. Absence of blood pooling or tissue reaction supported this timeline. No drugs or alcohol were found in toxicology results. Minor abrasions on the palms suggested brief resistance. No foreign DNA was recovered. Hair and skin samples did not indicate sexual trauma. Investigative observations. Coleman had reportedly expressed concerns about being watched during recent night shifts but had not filed a formal complaint. Her caution and consistent routine mirrored those of the first victim, Denise Harrow. Both women were young, Caucasian, with auburn hair, and were last seen in urban environments under low-light conditions. Both bodies were found dismembered, but fully clothed, in isolated areas within 15 miles of downtown Columbus. Forensic investigators recovered beige synthetic fibers embedded in the hem of the victim's blouse. Lab analysis confirmed the fibers were chemically and structurally identical to those from Harrow's body, again pointing to a General Motors vehicle interior manufactured during the mid-1970s. No additional trace materials were found. Case linkage and early pattern recognition. At this stage, Franklin County investigators and the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit acknowledged strong linkage between the Harrow and Coleman cases. The dismemberment indicated a specific and deliberate offender signature. The absence of sexual assault or theft, paired with the repeated removal of limbs, suggested symbolic or psychological motive rather than pragmatic disposal. It was the consensus that a single offender was involved, and that further victims were probable unless apprehension occurred. On the evening of October 14, 1978, at 20:47 hours, a visibly injured female entered the lobby of the Columbus Police Substation on West Lane Avenue and reported an attempted abduction. The individual, later identified as Carla Simmons, age 19, a second-year student at Ohio State University, had bruises to her wrists, facial lacerations, and abrasions on her knees. She reported that she had escaped from a man who attempted to restrain her inside his vehicle. Her description of the suspect and vehicle would become the first direct eyewitness account linked to the serial offender responsible for multiple disappearances. Victim statement, timeline of events. Simmons recounted leaving a campus study group at approximately 19:30 hours and beginning her walk home. Near the intersection of King Avenue and Highland, she was approached by a man driving a beige-colored vehicle, a 1976 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme. The man claimed to be an off-duty police officer and warned her about a killer targeting red-haired girls in the area, then offered her a ride to a safer place. Simmons hesitated, but the man flashed what appeared to be a leather badge wallet. Feeling intimidated and persuaded by his authoritative tone, she entered the vehicle. She noted that the interior smelled faintly of antiseptic and that the rear seats were covered by a large plastic sheet. After several minutes, the driver diverted from his stated route, turning down a poorly lit access road near the river trail. Simmons protested. The driver responded by retrieving a thin nylon cord from the center console and attempting to restrain her hands. During the struggle, Simmons glimpsed a bone-handled saw under a folded towel on the rear floorboard. Believing her life was in imminent danger, she fought back, unlocked the door, and threw herself from the moving vehicle. She landed hard on a gravel shoulder, sustaining minor injuries, and ran to a nearby gas station, where an attendant contacted emergency services. Physical evidence collected. Beige synthetic fibers found on Simmons' sleeves and under her fingernails, consistent with prior victims' trace evidence. Adhesive residue on her right forearm, consistent with attempted restraint using tape. Partial latent fingerprint lifted from Simmons' purse strap, where the suspect had grabbed during the altercation. Suspect description provided. White male, 30 to 40 years old. Height, approximate 5 feet 10 inches. Build, medium. Hair, light brown or sandy blonde, short. Clothing, tan windbreaker, dark trousers. Vehicle, 1976 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme, beige. Investigative response. Simmons' description enabled law enforcement to generate the first composite sketch of the suspect. It was distributed statewide, and cross-referenced against DMV records for vehicles matching the description. The car, especially the model and year, significantly narrowed the suspect pool. The FBI's Behavioral Science Unit updated their offender profile. The use of fake credentials and impersonation tactics showed increasing confidence and sophistication. The attempt to abduct Simmons mirrored behavioral elements seen in the previous murder cases, particularly the use of deception and confined vehicle-based environments. Operational impact. This marked the first time law enforcement had a surviving victim, viable suspect description, and trace evidence in combination. Internal memoranda recommended immediate formation of a multi-jurisdictional task force to consolidate data, monitor auto repair shops for similar vehicle damage, due to Simmons' escape, and run down all local leads involving 1970s beige sedans registered to single men with prior impersonation or assault charges. On October 23, 1978, at approximately 16:38 hours, Mrs. Agnes Rollins, age 72, arrived at the Columbus Police Substation on Livingston Avenue to report suspicious activity involving her neighbor at 1148, Kirkland Avenue, Apartment 2B. Rollins described the man as strange and private, but stated that his behavior had become more troubling in recent days. She reported seeing him carry 2 large black plastic bags into the building using the rear stairwell, and noticed drops of what appeared to be blood in the common hallway. Rollins also disclosed that the man had invited her in for soup the previous afternoon, an uncharacteristically sociable gesture. She accepted. The soup, she said, had an unusual taste. Hours later, she fell ill. Law enforcement response. Officers were dispatched to the Kirkland Avenue location at 17:22 hours. The tenant of apartment 2B was not present. Based on the report of possible blood evidence and known connections to the Auburn investigation, detectives secured a judicial search warrant for the premises. Scene description: apartment 2B. The apartment was dim, with heavy drapes drawn across all windows. The air was thick with the smell of boiled meat, disinfectant, and rot. In the kitchen, a large saucepan simmered on the stove. It contained thick broth, chunks of fatty tissue, and fibrous organic material. Near the stove, investigators found a second pot in the sink, containing boiled human phalanges and metacarpals, consistent with adult hands. On the counter was a recently washed bone saw, along with a wooden cutting board stained with brownish red residue. The refrigerator contained wax paper-wrapped packages labeled with handwritten notes, soup meat, and roast cuts. No commercial groceries were found in the apartment. Witness identification and reaction. Mrs. Rollins was brought to the scene to identify the contents. Upon seeing the pot and its contents, she became distressed and began retching. "That's the soup," she said. That's what he gave me. She was treated for shock and released to relatives later that evening. Evidence recovered. Partial skeletal remains, hand bones, jaw fragments. Cooking implements with biological residue. Wax-wrapped meat samples. Fiber and blood evidence matching prior scenes. A typed note reading, "Clean early. Wrap tight. Waste nothing." All remains were confirmed human via forensic analysis. The meat samples were determined to be from multiple individuals. DNA testing confirmed the presence of tissue from Shelby and Lockhart and Emily Donnelly, both previously reported missing. Suspect identification. Lease records identified the tenant as Russell Wayne Eldred, age 36. DMV confirmed ownership of a beige 1976 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme, Ohio registration RZN 548. Eldred had a minor criminal history, including prior arrests for impersonating law enforcement, charges dismissed. His vehicle description matched that of the attempted abduction of Carla Simmons. Manhunt initiated. A "Be on the lookout" (BOLO) alert was issued. Surveillance was placed on known associates and former employers. Patrols monitored highway routes and transportation hubs. Eldred's residence was preserved as a sealed crime scene. Officers were instructed to approach with caution due to his suspected involvement in multiple homicides and cannibalistic practices. Following the forensic discovery of human remains and cannibalistic evidence in apartment 2B at 1148, Kirkland Avenue, the Franklin County Sheriff's Department launched an active manhunt for Russell Wayne Eldred, age 36. Vehicle registration records confirmed ownership of a 1976 beige Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme, matching descriptions from surviving witness Carla Simmons. On October 25, 1978, at 10:14 hours, Eldred was located and arrested without resistance in the parking lot of a discount supermarket in Reynoldsburg, Ohio. He was dressed in a tan windbreaker and jeans, and appeared composed but disheveled. Officers noted his calm demeanor and lack of visible emotional response. A search of his vehicle at the scene revealed the following. A bone-handled saw, consistent with one described by Simmons. Multiple nylon cords and duct tape rolls. A sealed cooler in the trunk, containing wax-wrapped cooked meat. Trace blood stains on the rear passenger carpet, confirmed human. Interrogation summary, October 25, 1978. Eldred was taken into custody and read his Miranda rights. The interrogation was conducted at the Franklin County Sheriff's Office by Detectives Gerald Hume and Lieutenant Vincent Costa. Eldred waived counsel temporarily and agreed to speak. The interview was audio recorded and partially transcribed. Costa: "We found meat in your apartment. We know what it is. Can you explain what you were doing?" Eldred: "Cooking. I don't waste anything." Hume: "Those were people, Russell. Girls. You understand that?" Eldred: "They tasted better than I thought. Especially after brining." Costa: "Why would you do that?" Eldred: "Why does anyone eat meat? I made sure it was clean. You can't let good flesh go bad." Throughout the interrogation, Eldred maintained a disturbingly neutral tone. He referred to the victims as cuts, described the cooking process in detail, and even offered the officers a taste, stating, "You wouldn't know the difference. Try it sometime." When pressed for the identities of the victims or the manner of their deaths, Eldred refused to confirm any specific actions. He denied direct responsibility for the killings, stating only, "They weren't alive when I started. I just took care of what was left." After being confronted with mounting forensic evidence, Eldred requested legal counsel and ended the interview. Forensic confirmation. Biological samples from Eldred's apartment, vehicle, and cooking equipment were matched to victims. Shelby Lockhart, molar recovered from sink drain. Emily Donnelly, partial femur found in stove side bin. Martha Coleman, tissue match from meat cooler. Denise Harrow, sweater fibers recovered from vehicle trunk, although no remains were definitively tied. DNA extraction was limited by degradation in cooked material but supported the identities. Psychological profile, observations. Behavioral science unit observers noted Eldred's detached affect, lack of remorse, and focus on food preparation rather than murder. He displayed no signs of delusion, hallucination, or psychotic break. Psychiatrist Dr. Howard Niven described Eldred as possessing a high-functioning antisocial personality with ritualistic fixation on consumption. Formal charges and holding. On October 26, Eldred was formally charged with 4 counts of aggravated murder. 1 count of attempted kidnapping, Simmons. Multiple counts of abuse of a corpse. Impersonation of a law enforcement officer. He was held in solitary confinement under suicide watch. No confession was obtained, but physical and testimonial evidence was sufficient for prosecution to proceed. Between October 26 and November 5, 1978, forensic investigators worked to identify remains recovered from Russell Eldred's apartment and vehicle. Using dental records, bone structure analysis, and mitochondrial DNA comparison, available in preliminary form, authorities positively identified body parts and tissue samples as belonging to Shelby and Lockhart, molar and hand bones found in the sink and refrigerator. Emily Rachel Donnelly, femoral bone segment located in stove side bin and cooked tissue sample from sealed cooler. Martha Lynn Coleman, phalange fragments and muscle tissue in soup broth confirmed via sibling DNA. Denise Marie Harrow, no direct remains recovered, but matching sweater fibers were found embedded in trunk carpeting of Eldred's vehicle. Though Harrow's physical remains were not conclusively recovered from the residence, circumstantial forensic links and patterns of abduction, transport, and concealment were deemed sufficient to include her among the confirmed victims. Formal charges filed, November 8, 1978. The Franklin County Prosecutor's Office filed the following charges against Russell Wayne Eldred. 4 counts of aggravated murder. 1 count of attempted kidnapping, Carla Simmons. 3 counts of abuse of a corpse. 2 counts of impersonating a law enforcement officer. The prosecution opted to pursue 2 life sentences without parole, due to Ohio's suspension of capital punishment at the time. Eldred's legal counsel entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. Public disclosure and reaction, November 10, 1978. During a press briefing, Franklin County Sheriff Robert Helmuth confirmed Eldred's arrest and the discovery of human remains. While official statements refrained from using the term cannibalism, media outlets quickly publicized leaked reports of meat samples, human bones, and eyewitness accounts of neighbors being fed stew. The case exploded into national news under headlines such as "Cannibal Killer Nabbed in Columbus," the Columbus Dispatch. "He served them human flesh," Associated Press. "The Neighbor Who Cooked Women," Cleveland Plain Dealer. Local response was one of panic and revulsion. Mrs. Agnes Rollins, who had unknowingly consumed Eldred's cooking, was hospitalized for anxiety and later moved in with relatives. Multiple residents of the apartment complex required psychological counseling. Several grocery stores in the area reported panic-driven meat product returns. Inmate Behavior and Mental Health Review. Held under isolation at Franklin County Jail, Eldred exhibited no suicidal tendencies or signs of distress. Corrections officers described his behavior as quiet, meticulous, and unervingly polite. He made repeated requests for access to cookbooks and a hot plate, all denied. Psychiatric evaluation by Dr. Howard Niven concluded. Subject is legally sane. He is aware of his actions, their criminal nature, and is capable of forming intent. There is no evidence of psychosis. He possesses narcissistic and antisocial traits with a fixation on control through preparation and ingestion. He does not view his victims as individuals, but as product. Case assembly and witness protection. Prosecutors secured protective custody and psychological care for Carla Simmons, whose testimony as the lone survivor would be central. Forensic timelines, photographic evidence, meat sample DNA, and vehicle trace analysis were compiled into a 1,200-page trial dossier. Trial date was set for March 5, 1979. Operational closure. By November 21, 1978, the Auburn Murders Task Force officially reclassified the case as resolved, pending trial. While inquiries continued into other possible victims, Eldred was confirmed responsible for the deaths of 4 known women through direct evidence and behavioral pattern linkage. The trial of Russell Wayne Eldred began on March 5, 1979, at the Franklin County Courthouse, presided over by Judge Harold E. Markson. Jury selection was completed with considerable difficulty due to public exposure and media saturation. Jurors were screened for neutrality regarding press reports of cannibalism and were sequestered for the duration of the trial. Lead prosecutor Clara Mendez presented over 220 pieces of evidence, including DNA and fiber analysis linking Eldred's vehicle and residence to all 4 victims. Human remains positively identified via dental records and mitochondrial DNA. The bone-handled saw used in dismemberments. Cooked tissue samples from Eldred's refrigerator and soup pot, matched to known victims. Testimony from Carla Simmons, who identified Eldred as her abductor. Photographic evidence of Eldred's apartment, including annotated newspaper clippings and cut human bones. The phony, special officer, badge Eldred used to deceive victims. Defense strategy. Court-appointed attorney James P. Yoder entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. The defense argued that Eldred suffered from long-term psychological disorders and could not fully comprehend the consequences of his actions. Testimony from one defense psychiatrist claimed Eldred displayed signs of ritualistic delusional thinking related to food and mortality. However, prosecution countered with psychiatric evaluations declaring Eldred legally sane and capable of calculated deception. The jury viewed audio excerpts from his interrogation, during which he described his food preparation techniques with disturbing calm and clarity. Verdict and sentencing. On April 12, 1979, following 11 hours of deliberation, the jury returned the following verdicts. Guilty on 4 counts of aggravated murder, Harrow, Coleman, Lockhart, Donnelly. Guilty on 1 count of attempted kidnapping, Carla Simmons. Guilty on 3 counts of abuse of a corpse. Guilty on 2 counts of impersonating a peace officer. Judge Markson sentenced Eldred to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. 60 years additional for related charges. Incarceration and death. Eldred was transferred to the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility in Lucasville on May 3, 1979. He remained isolated due to threats from other inmates and was described as cooperative but detached. Between 1980 and 1985, Eldred filed 5 appeals, all were denied. On June 18, 1993, Eldred suffered a fatal myocardial infarction in the prison infirmary. He was 51 years old. No family claimed the body. He was buried in an unmarked grave on state correctional grounds. Post-trial review and legacy. In 2002, advancements in DNA analysis allowed retesting of preserved samples. Mitochondrial DNA confirmed that bone and tissue fragments from Eldred's kitchen belonged to Martha Coleman and Shelby Lockhart, thereby posthumously affirming Eldred's guilt in all 4 homicides. The Auburn murders became a landmark case in the evolution of forensic linkage, particularly through fiber evidence, trace analysis, and the emergent use of DNA in cold case resolution. Survivor impact. Carla Simmons completed her criminal justice degree in 1981 and became a victims' rights advocate. In 1998, she co-founded Project SHIELD, a non-profit dedicated to campus security reform and survivor support. She remains the only known survivor of Eldred's attacks. Case closure. The FBI officially classified the Auburn murders as closed, conditional, in 2003. While no additional victims have been formally attributed to Eldred, several disappearances from 1977 to 1978 remain open. The case endures in law enforcement training as a cautionary tale of forensic persistence, psychological manipulation, and how even the most horrific crimes can hide behind the face of a quiet neighbor.